Thank you, choir. It's wonderful to stand up right after a beautiful song like that. Good morning. MDUUC. Right? I want to share a reading from a dear colleague who died a few years ago. It's an expression, I think, of a beautiful expression of spiritual generosity. It's called That Which Holds All. Because she wanted everyone to feel included in the prayer, she said right at the beginning several names for the holy. Spirit, she said, Holy One, Mystery, God. But then, thinking these weren't enough ways of addressing that which cannot fully be addressed, she added particularities, saying, Spirit of life, Spirit of love, Ancient, Holy One, Mystery we will not ever fully know, Gracious God, and also Spirit of this earth, God of Sarah, Gaia, Thou. And then, tongue loosened, she fell to naming superlatives as well. Most creative one, greatest source, closest hope. Even though superlatives for the sacred seemed to her probably redundant, but then she couldn't stop. One who made the stars, she said, although she knew technically a number of those present didn't believe the stars had been made by anyone or anything, but just luckily happened. One who is the entire ocean of compassion, she said. And no one laughed. That which has been present since before the beginning, she said. And the room was silent. Then, though she hadn't imagined it this way, others began to offer names. Peace, said one. One my mother knew, said another. Ancestor, said a third. Wind, rain, breath, said one near the back. Refuge, that which holds all. A child said water. Someone said womb, then witness. Great kindness, great eagle, eternal stillness. And then there wasn't any need to say the things she'd thought would be important to say, and everyone sat, hushed. Until someone said, Amen. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for your warm welcome. I had the privilege, actually, of being here a year ago. I came for the purpose of thanking you and praising you and telling you how great we think you are. I'm glad to have another opportunity to do that, to remind you what a wonderful leader you are in our larger faith. The remarkable and innovative ministry that you offer in Contra Costa County, and also your tremendous, generous financial support of our larger faith, which makes such a difference to congregations across the country who have less, and to our nation as we are able, through your generosity, to amplify the values that we share in the larger world. Thank you for all that you do to live our values through your life together and in the larger world. And thank you to Leslie for all the ways she shares her remarkable gifts of leadership with our larger faith. So I knew all of this about you, but what I did not know is that you have a mascot. That's amazing. Thanks to Les and Sue for the loan of the Mount Diablo. Y'all have seen this? The Mount Diablo duck. It makes me very happy. I actually don't know any other congregations that have a mascot. And at this point, I don't even think they should try, because there will be no better mascot than this. Seriously, I'm very impressed with your strategic vision and the themes that are energizing your ministry together. I especially like the way you end your vision work with "make it so" affirmations about communications and stewardship. I think that is actually where a lot of congregations get stuck, is they come up with this great vision and give it a poetic and obscure name, right? And less attention to the disciplines that will bring the vision to life. Make it so. And that your actual visual representation, you've all seen it, right? It's in chalk out on the sidewalk. It's fantastic. And at the base of it, the foundation, is stewardship. Now that my job title includes the word stewardship, I spend a lot of time talking about what I think stewardship is, so I hope you will indulge me just for a moment, because I do believe that stewardship is one of the essential practices of our faith. For me, stewardship is about gratitude and generosity, about recognizing that the gift of life and the gifts of life are just that, gifts. And what do we do when we receive a gift? We give thanks. The practice of giving thanks actually builds our capacity for recognizing the gifts around us, right? That's what a practice is. It's something that builds our capacity. And recognizing the gifts around us moves us from fear and a sense of scarcity about our lives to generosity, love, and faith that there is enough and that we are enough. Stewardship is recognizing the resources available to us to live our lives with purpose, and nurturing, growing, and protecting those resources for the things that really matter. Though I have never seen it represented the way you all have done it, stewardship truly is the base on which the chalice of transformation rests. I also love this visual of the tree with the roots and the new buds. It's interesting, I am not at all a visual person, but I am so moved by the way you have made these things so vivid in image. The tree with the roots and the new buds visibly holding in balance the tree's substance. And it begins, of course, with legacy. Your legacy includes, as Leslie has said already this morning, people with hopes and commitments much like yours for a world transformed by acts of love and justice. They took a leap of faith in purchasing this property, needing to self-finance in the beginning, and giving much so that this beautiful home would be here for you, for us today. They did it for you. They knew, or at least they hoped, that you would be here today. They invested their lives, including significant financial investment, so that Mount Diablo Unitarian Universalist could minister to you and your families and this community. So I want to take Leslie's prayer, grounding us in that gratitude, a little step further, and ask you to help me begin this time of reflection with real gratitude and acknowledgement to the legacy. Would you call out the names of any you remember and hold dear who helped to make it possible for us to be here today? We give thanks for their commitment, their vision, their courage, their generosity. Of course, many things have changed over the 70 years since this congregation was first imagined. Tastes and styles have changed. We'd like to think we finally have it. Good taste, right? But we know all too well that we will be remembered decades from now for our poor taste and utter lack of style. But style and taste aside, I have no doubt that the congregation then would be pretty surprised by many things about your congregation now. Do you think that's true? What would surprise the congregation then about the congregation now? Informality, size. The house band. Being sanctuary, did I hear? What else? Substantive about the nature of this community. Welcoming. Being a welcoming community. The diversity. Intersectionality. They might be surprised, I don't know, by my presence and Leslie's as ministers. The diversity of families in the community. The many marriages of many types that happen here. Our inclusion of people who are transgender. Let's just sit with that for a second and think about the tremendous change that has happened since this congregation was first imagined. Because this is what you've done. Please don't forget that this congregation is playing a part in making the world more just, inviting and welcoming new communities of people into your embrace, including declaring yourselves to be a sanctuary congregation for the second time, right, in your history, welcoming those at risk into the sanctuary of your building and your love. And now you've embraced this bold and brave vision to become an exuberantly multicultural, sacred sanctuary for spiritual growth, connection, and renewal. 60, 70 years ago, they also had a vision to transform the world with acts of love and justice. But it's important to remember, I think, that not all of them would be comfortable that you took them at their word. That you have not stopped pushing yourselves to be more inclusive, to embrace emerging movements for justice, extending yourselves even when it has been uncomfortable. I sometimes imagine our history, our Unitarian Universalist history, as a series of concentric circles. Some of the early Unitarians, I'm sure you know, were Christians in Eastern Europe who would not be held by the dogmatic walls of their day. Remarkable for their time, but we would not recognize them as siblings in faith, and they certainly would not embrace us. The idea that a non-Christian could be a Unitarian was the furthest thing from their imagination. And so it has gone through our history that radical people on the edges of our communities have challenged the limitations of our understanding and courage in order to fundamentally and often dramatically change who we are and what we mean by us. One of those radicals was Theodore Parker. He pushed the edges theologically and his understanding in his understanding of what a just world looks like. He was one of those who helped to fund the rebellion. In fact, his theology and his work for the abolition of slavery caused him to be marginalized by most of the Unitarians of his day. The ministers, by and large, did not consider him one of us. In 1841, he delivered a sermon entitled "The Transient and the Permanent in Christianity," in which he challenged the Unitarians of his day to protect the core of love that guided their faith, to protect that core, but to hold loosely the practices and customs and some of the beliefs and the prejudices that would inevitably change with time. Parker's challenges ought to be heeded by us as well, all these years later. I wonder if there's a Theodore Parker among us. Have we marginalized him? Do we consider her one of us? Expanding the circle of acceptance and inclusion is not always a natural or comfortable thing to do. Even the most heroic are challenged by this work. Even, I'm going to say it, even the Black Panther. Anybody? If you haven't seen the Black Panther, I highly recommend it. Even if you are not a Marvel movie kind of moviegoer. I promise I won't say too much about the movie, but I want to tell you this little piece. The movie is set in Wakanda, a fictionalized country on the continent of Africa that has been untouched by colonialism. There are 6 tribes in Wakanda, and generations ago, 5 of them agreed to share resources and protect a way of life that they had developed. The 6th tribe rebelled and moved to the hills. At a pivotal moment in the movie, Wakanda's King T'Challa, aka the Black Panther, needs the help of the rebel tribe. But to even get to that conversation, King T'Challa has to reach beyond his knowing and his comfort zone, taking a risk, extending himself. And when he does, when he asks the tribal leader for his help, the leader is also forced beyond his knowing and beyond his comfort, and he understandably responds to the request for help with this question. When you say us, who do you mean? I'm not going to tell you what happens next. But I want you, when you see it, if you have not already, to remember this question, because this is a question that animates every character in the movie, from the superhero Black Panther to the super villain Killmonger. When you say us, what do you mean? Well, it isn't spoiling anything, I think, to reveal that the heroes are the ones who nurture new buds of growing acceptance, inclusion, and justice. I'm afraid that sometimes we get a little bit self-satisfied about how radically inclusive we have become as a faith movement. And in so many ways we have. But sadly, I think this can make us complacent, behaving as though we have reached the culmination of our growth and courage as a faith, that we have nothing new to learn, that we are the first generation in the history of the universe who will not be remembered by the limitations of our imagination and understanding. That's a little bit arrogant, yes? Pretty naive. But I also want to say I think it's just a terribly sad vision. Imagine it's 70 years from now, or maybe just 20. Do we want the people who gather as the Mount Diablo Unitarian Universalists to be just like us? Or do we pray that they will have grown in their understanding and wisdom at least as much as this community has grown in its history? Leslie put this beautifully in a recent blog post. We are living in an age in which we are constantly being exposed to other people's experiences, and in that exposure we learn the ways that we may have diminished the experiences of others without knowing it. This dance of knowing and unknowing, the waltz of accountability, the ever-expanding spiral of human knowing, is one of the amazing things about being a human being. always able to learn as long as life and breath grace our beings. It is our exposure, our connections with one another that make it possible for us to grow more generous toward one another and toward the other. The purpose of religion is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all, to take responsibility, to be accountable for the way our lives and our living affect others. The legacy of our faith in this movement toward ever-expanding circles is this ever-expanding circle of care and compassion. These are our strong roots. The new buds are always ways to greater inclusion, acceptance, and justice. We don't always get it right. When we miss the mark, it is usually because of our fear. Fear holds us back from connecting one with another in ways that would transform us. And always, our fear makes us ungenerous. That's what happened in one of my favorite stories from the Jesus tradition, the story of the fishes and the loaves. For a long time, I dismissed the story as some kind of silly magic trick. But I have come to learn a new way of hearing the story from teachers like Parker Palmer, and have come to appreciate it as a true story of human miracle. You see, some scholars have actually explained that what happened that day when all those masses of people were gathered to hear Jesus preach is that they actually had plenty of food from the very beginning. Neil, would you ever go on a day trip with your children and not pack plenty of provisions for them when they got hungry later in the day? Applesauce, Cheerios, kids bars. You just wouldn't do it. You're not going to travel all day with your family without provisions. But when the disciples went around collecting food, they weren't about to just give it away. Are you kidding? I don't know these people. They had carefully tucked their provisions away so that they would have them when they needed them. So after the disciples came back to Jesus and told him, rather smugly, I imagine, that there wouldn't be enough, Jesus did two things. First of all, he told the disciples to gather the people in groups and have them sit on the grass. It was small group ministry. It was small group ministry out in the desert with Jesus. So that's what they did. The disciples told everyone to gather in small groups. And what do you think happened? This massive crowd filled with strangers transformed into something entirely different. People looked at each other in the eye. They learned each other's names. They sat, they discovered the challenges they faced, the gifts they brought. They were transformed from a crowd of strangers into community. And once they were gathered that way, Jesus did a second thing. He said a prayer. Now, the story as we receive it doesn't get too specific about the prayer, but I'm going to say it was a prayer of gratitude, giving thanks for the meager collection of loaves and fishes, giving thanks and knowing that now that the people were seeing each other, recognizing each other as kindred, that their fear would melt away and their generosity would be unleashed. In the circles of people who had once been strangers, they piled the food they had brought, knowing now that the only way they would survive was together. They had enough, after all. It took seeing each other, really seeing each other, and remembering to be thankful for what they had, for them to unleash their generosity. May it be so.